Welcome to the Crab Orchard Review podcast. Crab Orchard Review was founded at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale in 1995 and is one of the leading literary journals in the United States. A publication of the Graduate School of the Department of Literature, Writing, and Digital Humanities, Crab Orchard Review seeks diverse voices, capturing the full range of contemporary writing. In this episode, Allison Joseph, editor, host, and founding member of Crab Orchard Review, will discuss our history and where we are headed. We hope you enjoy.
I came to SIU in 1994, in August of 1994, and my husband, the late poet and editor John Tribble, came along with me. And unbeknownst to us, our friend Carolyn Alessio was hired as a lecturer. We'd known Carolyn many years. We went to school with her at IU Bloomington. So all of a sudden, we had a managing editor in John, a poetry editor in me, and a prose editor in Carolyn. Carolyn had also worked for the Chicago Tribune. Our departmental chair was a gentleman named Dr. Richard Peterson. He's an Irish studies scholar, heavy into Joyce. And one thing he wanted for the department here at SIU Carbondale was a humanities journal, a literary journal, some sort of evidence that there were thinking and writing beings here in Carbondale. And when we were hired with all this wealth of experience, the three of us, he said, well, I've been promised funds from the upper administration to start a magazine. Now that you guys are here, I have a staff. He went back to those same administrators, who are long gone, and they said, oh, that project's really going forward. We don't really have funds for that anymore. But Dr. Peterson was a very determined person. He decided to go to outside sources, people who had resentments against these particular administrators, get donations from those people, and do our first issue funded on spite. We did that first issue. It came out and it was well received. And we had a really wonderful coincidence. Dr. Charles Fanning, who at the time was our head of Irish Studies, came to us and said, the American Conference for Irish Studies is going to actually have its meeting here in Carbondale. Could you do an issue of Crab Orchard Review on Irish and Irish American writing, have it ready for the conference, and I will fund that issue. And I'll sit in as a guest editor with you and help you select work. And we said, Erin go bra. Yeah, we're going to do that. So that's where our tradition of having issues that had a specific theme balanced against general issues came from, because if you look over the run of Crab Orchard Review, we've done issues where we collected the best poetry, fiction, and nonfiction we could find, and then issues that were on a certain theme. So that's where that came from. And after we had 2 issues, the administration was much more receptive to saying, oh, this is an ongoing project. This is something that we want to see, because it makes the university look good. It goes out into the world and people think, oh, there's intellectual life in that place. There's creative thinking going on. One of our early slogans was we wanted to be a magazine that readers enjoy and writers admire. So we were thinking of work that an average literate reader, someone who likes reading, would consider interesting. And our thought was writers of all stages in their careers are capable of writing things that everyone wants to read. So we often found ourselves reading writers early in their careers. But also another thing that was important to us was quality writers, people producing quality work who weren't the latest hot thing. The established writer, could always come back to us thinking, oh, I'll get a fair read. And that's an important thing for a literary magazine to do, I think, to establish a tradition of establishing writers wherever they are in their careers, whether they're newly minted in terms of maybe a creative writing degree, or they've just discovered their talent, and writers who are on their 15th book. We've published, over the course of these years, we've published people with their very first publications, we've published Pulitzer Prize winners, we've published Nobel Prize winners. So it's always been important to me, and to John, and to Carolyn, and to Dr. Peterson before he retired, to show a spectrum of thought, of approach, but always, and this was always important to me, making work accessible, because I think a lot of people feel, oh, literary writing, poetry, it's not for me. But we wanted to have a magazine that people would actually enjoy reading.
At this point, Allison shifts into discussing the process of moving forward as a publication in this new era.
It's been a difficult path, I'm not going to lie. Losing my life partner was one thing. Losing my work partner may be more difficult than losing one's life partner. I can always get married again, but finding a great managing editor, that's hard. And much of this was a combined vision, particularly in the latter stages, was a combined vision of John Tribble and Allison Joseph. And John passed in 2019, and the world has vastly changed since his passing. Even though it's only like 4, coming up on 5 years, it'll be 5 years in October, but the world has changed. We've been through a global pandemic. Technology has accelerated in ways we didn't predict. AI, the specter of AI, what does that do to creative writers? So going forward, some of the things that we lost along the way, I would love to reinstate. Talking about author interviews, talking about book reviews, because so many books are still being published. Poetry, fiction, nonfiction, memoir, graphic work. So many books are still being published, and they're going unreviewed because major newspapers have dropped their book review sections. The small presses, the university presses, the independent presses, they have become the lifeblood of serious literature. And I don't mean serious as in not funny, or I mean people who are dedicated to writing fiction and writing poetry and writing nonfiction as a craft. Occasionally, the independent book makes a huge splash. But in my field, my particular field, poetry, when you look at the major awards, the Pulitzer, the NBA, the National Book Critics Circle, all of those are either independent presses, small presses, or university presses. Poetry in particular has been abandoned by major houses for the most part. And that's a cultural sign, that's something to pay attention to. I think John would be smiling down on us to know that we're going to reinstate some of the things. Toward the end of John's time as our managing editor, his main contention was that we needed to have the entire run of Crab Orchard Review digitized and available for our readers. We were switching from our last few issues that we were going to do in print and reconfiguring as a digital journal. That's where Issue came in. And he, God bless him, decided to do this and made sure every single issue, back to the first one from 1996, was available on the web. We were able to finish an issue that was in progress when he passed, and that one came out in December of 2019. And then not long after that, the world kind of shut down. But he left us with this enormous gift. You know, here's the entire run of the literary journal, decades of poems, stories. And as I'm thinking moving forward, we can draw back on that as we move into the future. There's so much richness there. There's so many, as you noticed, voices that later on became voices that everybody knew. Mm-hmm. So I'm so grateful that even though his health was compromised during his last year and a half, he was able to complete that project. We're here in a world where increasingly literary magazines are under siege, whether they're print magazines or digital magazines. People have been mourning the loss of Gettysburg Review, one of the finest literary journals. And I have no intel on why such a successful magazine that raised the profile of a particular institution, why it was just eliminated summarily. I don't know, but I have seen that as a trend, that institutions are looking for ways to save money. But it really is scary to me when cultural institutions just sort of give up on literature, saying, oh, it's not necessary anymore. So we have the advantage of, we never died, because during the pandemic we did a lot of sort of online events, readings and roundtables and that sort of thing. So we never died. We're just picking up where we left off. Yes, one of the things that will probably be different, although you can never predict, is a dedication to shorter forms of prose that we had when the magazine was founded. And I, you know, being a poet, I am very much interested in the nexus between poetry and prose, whether it's creative nonfiction, the lyric essay. I'm also interested in shorter prose pieces and what distinguishes a prose poem from a flash. We do realize that people's attention spans are shorter, but some very traditional forms of writing are perfect for shorter attention spans, like the sonnet, for example, 14 lines. I have a special interest in that as a poet who leans toward formal work, but it's perfect. It's like an Oreo cookie. You know, you read one and you want another. So thinking about if a traditional full-length piece of fiction came our way and we loved it and we wanted to publish it, we would. But sort of rejiggering things, knowing that people's attention spans and that they're reading on tablets, that they're reading on phones, that they're reading on screens, right? And also, since this magazine is based out of the School of Literature, Writing, and Digital Humanities here at SIU Carbondale, we have a rich tradition of students from our MFA program going on to publish, going on to be successful teachers, editors, entrepreneurs. We can tap into our alumni base as well. And many of those folks are folks that a general reading and writing audience would know. Helping to grow our literature, our heritage, our poetry, our fiction, our nonfiction here at SIU helps the whole nation, and particularly the region, because there's this notion that Midwestern literature doesn't exist, that we're in flyover territory, that there's nothing of interest being written about. And I often say that to my students in my creative writing classes and my poetry classes, who come from often small towns in southern and central Illinois. It's like, I come from such a boring place. And then I'll fill them in on part of the history of where they come from. So everybody has a story. We never wanted to be a Midwestern magazine per se, but we always wanted to pay attention to what was happening in our region so that it didn't go underreported. Just showing the world that unlikely places are actually very good places to hone your craft and to write a lot. Through all the travail and the loss, me personally, but also in the world, that to feel like there are sacred spaces, there are places that we can walk into and feel whole again, that's amazing. And if we can cultivate that in different ways, but ways that John would be thumbs up about, that would be amazing. And for me to pass on to whoever takes up the reins after I'm gone. This fall will be my 30th year on the faculty at SIU. I'm not thinking about retiring right away, but I'm thinking about it. So we want to set this up so that whoever comes after us, because generations of students and faculty have cycled through while I've been here, and also chancellors, upper administration, sometimes very, very complimentary about what we do, and sometimes just didn't understand it at all. We just want to make sure that it goes beyond us, that there's someone to pick up the reins. Keep your eyes open for us, that we delight in reading your submissions. We welcome reading poetry, fiction, nonfiction, all of those good things. So send it our way.